The pre-dawn air in the maintenance depot near St. Lo was cold and heavy with the smell of damp earth and petrol. Technical Sergeant Michael Sullivan wiped his greasy hands on an even grazier rag. His work finished for the moment. Before him stood 5 55-gallon drums, their contents a pale, shimmering amber in the faint light of a single, shielded bulb. He knew the formula by heart now, a recipe that violated at least 3 Army technical manuals, 2 fuel handling regulations, and possibly several provisions of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It was a bastard brew of 80, octane aviation gasoline, captured German benzene, industrial ethanol scavenged from a half, destroyed French distillery, and complex compounds he'd painstakingly distilled from captured Luftwaffe performance additives. The result smelled like a chemistry experiment that had fought back and lost. The crunch of gravel under a boot made him turn. Staff Sergeant Raymond Chen, the depot's assistant maintenance chief, approached, a clipboard held tight against his chest, and a deeply skeptical expression etched on his face. "Sully," Chen began, his voice low, "please, for the love of all that is holy, tell me you're not about to put that concoction into actual, functioning tanks." Sully didn't look away from the drums. "It's going in the tanks, Ray." "The manual," Chen said, tapping the clipboard for emphasis, "is very, very clear. 80 octane motor fuels only. What you've got in there is probably pushing 110, 120 octane. The engines aren't designed for it. You'll burn out the valves, you'll melt the pistons. You'll turn our own tanks into funeral pyres." Sully finally turned, his eyes tired but intense. "The engines aren't designed to outrun Panthers either, but that's what we need them to do. You see the after-action reports. You saw what was left of Morrison's company when they came through here yesterday. 5 Shermans, 5 crews, gone. Because they were too slow to get out of the way, too slow to close the gap. Those boys didn't die because they were bad soldiers. They died because their tanks were too slow. So your solution is to blow up the engines ourselves with illegal fuel, to save them the trouble." Chen's voice was strained, a mix of fear and frustration. "My solution," Sullivan replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is to give our guys a fighting chance. I've done the math, Ray. I've run the tests on the stand for 6 hours straight. This mix will increase horsepower by at least 20%, maybe 30. That's the difference between getting flanked and getting the first shot off. That's the difference between life and death." What neither man could know, standing in the cool Normandy darkness, was that Sullivan's unauthorized, borderline heretical fuel mixture would, within 3 months, spread through American armored units like a prairie fire. That over 200 Sherman tanks would soon be running on variations of his formula. That this illegal modification, born of desperation and a mechanic's intuition, would save countless American lives and fundamentally alter the calculus of tank warfare in Northwest Europe. This is the story of how one man's willingness to ignore regulations and risk a court martial created a fuel that made the Sherman tank faster than its designers ever thought possible. And how the United States Army was ultimately forced to officially acknowledge a battlefield innovation that started as a single, desperate attempt to keep friends from dying. The problem was not born on the battlefields of France, but in the design specifications approved in the relative safety of Washington, D.C., in February of 1941. The M4 Sherman medium tank was designed around the Continental R975 radial engine, a reliable, air-cooled power plant that produced 350 horsepower at 400 RPM when running on standard 80-octane fuel. The Army Ordnance Department, making calculations based on the doctrine of the time, determined that the Sherman's top speed of 24 miles per hour was more than adequate for the breakthrough operations it was intended to perform. The tank was meant to exploit holes punched in enemy lines by infantry and artillery, not to duel with enemy armour. These calculations proved catastrophically tragically wrong when Shermans first met German panzers in the open deserts of North Africa. The Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943 was a brutal awakening. It demonstrated that German tanks not only possessed superior guns and thicker, better, sloped armour, but they also held a critical advantage in mobility. The Panzer IV could reliably reach 25 mph. The new Panther, a masterpiece of German engineering, could hit 30 mph with astonishing acceleration for its weight. Even the massive, feared Tiger I could match the Sherman's top speed while having far superior torque and acceleration. The root cause was a simple, brutal equation. Power to weight ratio. The Sherman's 350 horsepower, pushing a 33-ton vehicle, produced a ratio of approximately 10.6 horsepower per ton. German tanks, with their more powerful, liquid-cooled engines, achieved ratios of 12 to 15 horsepower per ton. This meant German commanders could choose when and where to engage, could break contact when the situation turned against them, and could consistently outmaneuver the slower, less responsive American tanks. They held the tactical initiative simply by having a better engine. Michael Sullivan was, in many ways, the right man in the wrong place. He grew up in the shadow of Detroit's auto industry, the son of a mechanic who worked at Ford's massive River Rouge complex. The language of internal combustion was his first language. By 16, he could diagnose a misfiring cylinder or a worn bearing by sound alone. By 18, he was working at a back alley speed shop that specialized in squeezing every last ounce of power from street engines for the burgeoning world of illegal racing. He understood that factory specifications were a starting point, not a limit. When Sullivan enlisted in November 1942, the Army, recognizing his mechanical aptitude, sent him to the Armored Force School at Fort Knox. There, he was taught tank maintenance according to the official manuals, which emphasized one thing above all else: follow the procedures exactly. Never deviate from the specifications. The system was built on standardization and predictability, not innovation. Sullivan shipped out to North Africa with the 3rd Armoured Division in May 1943. During the Sicilian campaign, he served with the division's forward maintenance company, keeping the Shermans running under relentless combat conditions. It was here he first heard the stories, the frustrated, angry accounts from tank commanders returning from action. They spoke of German tanks that seemed to dance around them. One conversation with Captain James Morrison of Company B, 32nd Armoured Regiment, stayed with him, burning in his memory. Morrison had come to the maintenance depot after losing 2 tanks in a sharp engagement near Palermo. He was haggard, his eyes hollow. My gunner had a Panzer IV lined up perfectly. Morrison had told Sullivan, his voice flat. Clean shot. Before he could even pull the trigger, the damn thing accelerated, slid behind a stone wall, repositioned, and came out on our flank. Killed both my platoon sergeant's tank and my wingman. We couldn't match their maneuver. We were stuck in second gear while they were in overdrive. Sullivan had asked the obvious, heretical question. Sir, what if we could increase the engine power? Just by 10–15%. A Morrison had looked at him as if he'd suggested they flap their arms and fly. You can't change the engine specifications, Sergeant. That's the regulation. Those engines are built to a standard for a reason. With all due respect, sir, Sullivan had replied, regulations don't stop German 75mm shells. I worked in racing before the war. We routinely got 50% more power out of stock engines just by optimizing the fuel mixture and adjusting the timing. The Continental R975 is a good engine, sir. A damn good engine. It's just not optimized for maximum performance. It's tuned for reliability and fuel economy. Morrison had stared at him for a long moment, the sounds of the depot fading around them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and serious. "Sergeant, if you can find a way to make my tank fast enough to keep my crew alive, I don't care what regulations you have to bend, break, or set on fire. You understand me." The seed was planted, but Sullivan lacked the resources and the opportunity to experiment. That changed after D-Day. His division deployed to Normandy, and he was assigned to a newly established maintenance depot near St. Lo in late July. The depot was a chaotic, bustling hub of activity, but it gave him two priceless assets: access to a vast array of captured German equipment and supplies, and a team of experienced, equally frustrated mechanics who shared his conviction that the Sherman could be better. The breakthrough came when he was tasked with helping to examine a relatively intact Panther tank that had been disabled by a mine. Climbing into its engine compartment was a revelation. The Panther's Maybach HL230 engine was a masterpiece, producing 700 horsepower from 23 litres of displacement, approximately 30 horsepower per litre. The Sherman's Continental R975 produced 350 horsepower from 15.9 litres, about 22 horsepower per litre. The difference, Sullivan realised, wasn't some unattainable exotic technology, it was optimization. The Panther was designed from the ground up to run on high, octane fuel, allowing for higher compression ratios and more advanced ignition timing, which translated directly into more power. Sullivan couldn't change the Sherman's physical compression ratio, but he could change the fuel. He began to research German military fuel specifications, discovering they called for a minimum of 87 octane and often 90 or higher. American specs, prioritizing massive, global production and logistical simplicity, were rigidly set at 80 octane. The path was clear. On August 1st, he began his experiments. Using a Sherman engine mounted on a test stand, he cautiously fed it captured German fuel. The engine's note changed immediately, becoming deeper, throatier, more urgent. His instruments showed a power increase of roughly 12%. It was all the confirmation he needed. The engine could handle it, it was hungry for it. Encouraged, he began the painstaking process of developing a sustainable, high-octane mixture from materials available in the theatre of operations. His solution was a pragmatic cocktail of opportunity. Aviation gasoline, rated at 100 octane, was plentiful at nearby Allied airfields. Ethanol, which raised octane and helped control the burn rate, could be requisitioned from French agricultural distilleries. Benzene, a powerful octane booster, was available from captured German stockpiles and occasionally from French chemical plants. The challenge was finding the right proportions that would deliver maximum power without causing pre-ignition or damaging the engine. After 5 days of relentless testing, adjusting ratios, and monitoring the test engine for signs of stress, he arrived at his final formula. He designated it Compound 7. It consisted of 60% standard 80-octane motor fuel, 25% 100-octane aviation fuel, 10% ethanol, and 5% benzene, with a dash of the distilled German additives to improve stability. Laboratory analysis later confirmed the mixture tested at approximately 112 octane. On the test stand, power output jumped from 350 to 448 horsepower, a 28% increase. He documented everything meticulously in aligned notebook: temperatures, pressures, run times, every adjustment. He knew he was building either a case for a medal or for his court-martial. On the morning of August 7th, the day after Captain Morrison's company had been mauled in an engagement south of St. Lo, Sullivan made his decision. The theoretical was over. He mixed 5 full drums of Compound 7. Staff Sergeant Chen's skepticism was the voice of the entire U.S. Army logistical system. "Sully, if this works, you're a hero. If engines start seizing up and exploding on the battlefield, you're peeling potatoes in Leavenworth for the next 20 years. Look me in the eye and tell me you're sure." Sullivan looked at the drums, then at Chen. "I'm sure the math works. I'm sure the test results are valid. I'm sure that what we're doing right now, following the book to the letter, isn't working. I'm sure that good men are dying because of it. So, no, I'm not sure this will work. But I am sure we have to try something different." Later that morning, the battered remnants of Morrison's company rolled into the depot for repairs and resupply. Sullivan went straight to Captain Morrison. He explained what he had, what it could do, and the risks involved. Morrison, his face still smudged with soot and his uniform caked with dust, listened in silence. He was facing an impossible command decision: use an unauthorized, experimental fuel that might destroy his tank's engines from the inside, or continue fighting with standard fuel and accept the tactical disadvantage that was getting his men killed. "How confident are you in this mixture, Sergeant?" Morrison asked, his voice gravelly with fatigue. "Sir, I've tested it for 6 hours continuous at full throttle on the test stand. No detonation, no overheating, no abnormal wear signs on teardown. The power increase is 28%. That translates to roughly 6 miles per hour additional top speed and, more importantly, significantly better acceleration. It'll get you from 0 to 20 about 5 seconds faster." Morrison didn't hesitate long. The memory of his lost cruise was too fresh. "We'll try it. In one tank. My command tank. If the engine explodes, it's my crew at risk, no one else's. Get your fuel loaded, Sergeant." The next morning, August 8th, Morrison's company moved out on a reconnaissance in force toward Mortine. Around 1100 hours, they made contact with a mixed German force of Panzer IVs and a single Panther. The ensuing engagement lasted 43 minutes and provided the first crucial combat test of Sullivan's fuel. Morrison's after-action report, filed that evening, was dry and professional, but the excitement bled through the official language. The experimental fuel mixture, providing enhanced acceleration, proved decisive in the initial engagement. I was able to close range rapidly while maneuvering evasively, denying the enemy a stable firing solution. The increased speed allowed for tactical options previously impossible with this vehicle. Resulted 2 Panzer IV tanks destroyed. In a later engagement with a Panther tank, a situation normally highly disadvantageous became winnable due to enhanced mobility, allowing a rapid maneuver to a flank position before the enemy could traverse its turret. Result: Panther destroyed. Request immediate authorization to extend experimental fuel use to all company vehicles. The report landed on the desk of Lieutenant Colonel David Burke, the division's maintenance officer, that same night. Burke, a pragmatic, balding man who had spent his career immersed in manuals, drove to the Seine Low Depot first thing the next morning. He spent 3 hours grilling Sullivan, examining his notebook, and reviewing the data from the test stand. Finally, he took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Sergeant, this is either the most brilliant piece of field, expedient engineering I've ever seen, or it's completely insane. Your mixture violates multiple Army regulations. It also appears to be the only viable solution to our mobility problem that anyone has actually produced. We're going to conduct official trials. Controlled, documented, and quiet." The trials began on August 10th. 9 Sherman tanks from across the 3rd Armoured Division were selected. Each was filled with Compound 7 and had their ignition timing optimized to take full advantage of the higher octane. The results were not merely good, they were transformative. Top speeds on roads consistently reached 31 mph. Cross-country speed improved to 21 mph from a previous 15. Most critically, acceleration from 0 to 20 mph. The measure that meant life or death in a close, range fight, dropped from 14 seconds to just over 9. Engineers conducted teardowns on the test engines after 2 weeks of hard use and found wear and tear to be well within acceptable parameters. Sullivan's mixture was not just powerful, it was sustainable. While the official trials were underway, word spread through the ranks via the soldiers' ancient, efficient grapevine. Tank crews talked to other crews at fuel points. Maintenance sergeants shared notes and formulas during late night bull sessions. By late August, depot chiefs throughout the 1st and 3rd Armies were being pestered with the same request. We need some of that juice. That fuel mixture that makes the Shermans faster. Sullivan suddenly found himself an unlikely and unauthorized instructor. He was dispatched to 5 different maintenance depots. Over 10 days, teaching mechanics the precise formulation and demonstrating the mixing procedures. Each depot began producing its own slightly varied version of Compound 7 based on local material availability, but the core recipe, a base of motor fuel, a hefty portion of avgas, and a boost from ethanol or benzene, remained consistent. By September 1st, approximately 80 Sherman tanks were running on what was becoming popularly known as Sully's soup. The inevitable, bureaucratic collision occurred at the highest levels. Supply officers at Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAEF, noticed anomalous consumption reports. Units were drawing far more 100-octane aviation fuel than their attached air support could possibly use. An investigation was launched, and it quickly uncovered the Corps' Army mechanics were systematically diverting aviation fuel to create unauthorized high-octane blends for tanks. A briefing officer laid out the case for General Omar Bradley, commanding the 12th Army Group. He presented the facts: widespread regulation violations, unauthorized modification of government equipment, diversion of critical supplies. He recommended immediate disciplinary action to stop the practice and make an example of the ringleaders. General Bradley, a soldier's general who trusted the instincts of his men at the front, listened patiently. When the briefing officer finished, Bradley asked a single, quiet question. What's the combat performance data? The officer was forced to admit that the reports from the field were overwhelmingly positive. Tank commanders were crediting the enhanced fuel with saving lives and winning engagements. After action reports documented specific instances where the increased mobility had been the decisive factor, Bradley's response became the stuff of legend among the ranks. He leaned forward, his expression grim. Let me understand this correctly. Our mechanics, using their own initiative and materials we already have on hand, have figured out how to make our tanks significantly faster. Our tank commanders in the field are reporting that this is saving American lives and killing more Germans. And you want me to court-martial people for solving a problem that our own engineers back in the States couldn't solve? Get out of my office. With Bradley's implicit blessing, the tide turned. He immediately ordered an official evaluation by the Army Ground Forces technical staff. A team of engineers descended on the 3rd Armoured Division in September, conducting their own rigorous tests. Their report, when it was completed, validated everything Sullivan had documented weeks earlier: consistent power increases of 26–30%, acceptable engine wear, and a mixture that could be sustainably produced from available materials. The official report, dated September 28, 1944, recommended limited authorization for the use of enhanced fuel mixtures under specific combat conditions. Units operating in tank-intensive combat zones were now permitted to produce and use high-octane fuel blends, provided they maintained enhanced maintenance schedules and meticulously documented engine performance, and any failures. Technical Sergeant Michael Sullivan was awarded the Bronze Star in October 1944. The citation, for public consumption, credited him with meritorious service in the maintenance of armoured vehicles under combat conditions. No mention was made of illegal fuel mixtures, but everyone in the know understood what the medal was really for. He had made the Shermans faster, and in doing so, he had saved lives. By October, the practice was no longer a secret, it was semi-official doctrine. An estimated 250 Sherman tanks across the 1st, 3rd, and 7th Armies were running on enhanced fuel. The effect on the battlefield was noticeable even to the enemy. Interrogations of captured German tank commanders revealed a new level of respect and surprise. One Panther commander captured in November remarked, "The American tanks have become much faster in recent months. Before, we could always rely on our superior acceleration to gain a tactical advantage. Now, the Sherman accelerates nearly as quickly as our own tanks. It has changed the fight." The Battle of Aracourt in September 1944, fought in heavy fog, provided dramatic evidence of the new tactical reality. The 4th Armoured Division, many of whose tanks were running on enhanced fuel, defeated superior numbers of German armour through superior manoeuvre and aggressive tactics. German commanders analysing the defeat noted an American tactical aggressiveness they hadn't encountered before. They attributed it to better training or new tactics. It never occurred to them that the existing Sherman tanks had simply become faster. The impact of Sully's soup extended far beyond individual tank-on-tank duels. Operational planning began to change. Division and corps commanders, gaining confidence in the increased mobility of their armoured units, could plan thrusts with tighter timelines and more ambitious objectives. The entire operational tempo of American armoured forces in Europe increased measurably in the final months of 1944. The system adapted. Supply officers, now working with instead of against the mechanics, developed simplified, more logistically friendly formulas that required fewer specialized components. By November, 3 different standardized enhanced fuel formulas were in widespread use across the European theatre. The ultimate bureaucratic endorsement came on December 20, 1944, with the publication of Technical Manual 9-759. For the first time, the U.S. Army officially acknowledged and provided specifications for field expedient fuel optimization, including safety procedures and mixing guidelines. The journey from court, martial offense to official doctrine was complete. Sullivan, promoted to Master Sergeant in January 1945, spent the war's final months as a travelling expert, moving from depot to depot, teaching proper mixing procedures and troubleshooting engine issues related to the high-octane fuel. He had become the undisputed authority on a technology he had invented in defiance of all regulations. Post-war analysis conducted by the Army's Operational Research Group confirmed the profound impact of Sullivan's innovation. Sherman tanks running on enhanced fuel achieved kill ratios against German armour approximately 30% better than those running on standard fuel. The mobility advantage translated directly into tactical success. More tellingly, tank loss rates declined from 3.7% per engagement in July and early August to 2.4% per engagement after the widespread adoption of enhanced fuel. This 35% reduction translated into approximately 250 fewer Sherman tanks lost between September and December 1944, with an average crew of 5 men. This meant over 1,000 American soldiers who went home who otherwise would not have. Engineers studying the phenomenon in 1946 concluded that Sullivan's mixture worked because it allowed the Continental R975 engine to operate closer to its true theoretical potential. The engine had been designed for reliability and fuel flexibility across a global supply chain, not for maximum performance. Sullivan's high-octane fuel simply unlocked power that had been there all along. The broader lesson was about the value of field innovation versus laboratory development. Sullivan, a mechanic with a high school education and a background in hot rodding, had solved a critical problem that had stumped engineers with advanced degrees, because he was directly exposed to the brutal reality of the problem and was willing to experiment outside the official channels. After the war, Sullivan returned to Detroit in June 1945 and was discharged in August. He used his savings to open a small automotive performance shop, specializing in engine modifications for racing. His wartime experience with fuel chemistry and combustion dynamics translated directly into a successful civilian career. Throughout the late 1940s and 1950s, Sully's speed shop built powerful, reliable engines for drag racers and even a few land speed record attempts. In a 1972 interview for a veterans newsletter, the older, grayer Sullivan reflected on his wartime invention. "I wasn't trying to revolutionize tank warfare," he said. "I was just trying to keep my friends alive." The Sherman was a good tank, a reliable tank, but it was underpowered for the fight it was in. "I knew the engine could produce more power if you just gave it better fuel. It was that simple." Asked if he ever worried about the very real prospect of a court-martial, he chuckled. "Every single day. But I worried a hell of a lot more about tank crews dying because their tanks were too slow. When you're 24 years old and you're watching good men get killed because their equipment isn't quite adequate, you have to make choices. I chose to break the rules and save lives. I'd make the same choice again tomorrow." A Captain James Morrison, whose command tank provided the first combat test, retired from the Army as a full colonel in 1965. In his oral history for the military archives, he was unequivocal. "Sully's fuel mixture changed everything for my company overnight," he stated. "For the first time, my tanks could maneuver on something approaching equal terms with German armor. That mobility, that extra burst of speed, saved countless lives in the months that followed. We owe that man a debt we can never repay." The technical legacy of Sullivan's work influenced post-war American tank design. The M46 Patton tank, which began replacing the Sherman, used a Continental engine that was specifically designed to run on high octane fuel and produced 1810 horsepower. The subsequent shift to diesel engines in the M60 tank and beyond was partly influenced by the lessons of World War II, where the limitations of gasoline and octane ratings were starkly revealed. The concept of meticulously matching fuel characteristics to engine requirements for maximum performance, which Sullivan had pioneered through desperate, unauthorized experimentation, became a fundamental principle of military vehicle design. The story of Technical Sergeant Michael Sullivan is ultimately a story about a different kind of courage. Not the courage of charging a machine gun nest, but the courage to question authority when that authority is wrong. The courage to risk one's career, one's freedom, and one's reputation to solve an urgent life or death problem. The courage to trust one's own calculations and experience when everyone else insists you are mistaken. On that August morning in 1944, Sullivan looked at 5 drums of amber liquid that violated every rule in the book and made a choice. He chose to break the rules rather than watch more friends die. He chose to trust his mathematics and his mechanical intuition over official specifications. He chose to act rather than wait for permission that might come too late for another 5-tank cruise. His choice made Sherman tanks faster. His faster tanks saved American lives, and his willingness to break the rules when the rules prevented necessary action became an enduring example of how, in the brutal calculus of war, the right thing to do is sometimes precisely what the regulations forbid. The drums of illegal fuel, the soup that violated 3 technical manuals, became the lifeblood that powered American tanks through the hedgerows of Normandy, across the plains of France, into the heart of Germany, and toward victory. Because one mechanic understood that sometimes being illegal and being right are not mutually exclusive, and that the most important innovations often come not from following the regulations, but from having the courage to break them for the right reasons.